country girl, dog lover, blogger, and writer. Welcome to the Between the Keys podcast. I'm author KC Kendricks. Thanks for joining me for these informal ramblings about life and writing. This is my first podcast, so please forgive me for the occasional odd hesitation. This is a medium I need to get comfortable with. It's not like writing or blogging where I can hit the delete or backspace key. Once the words are spoken, they're out there. If I stutter and stammer, well, we've heard that what gets posted on the internet stays on the internet forever, and so it does. I'm a true country girl, having lived in rural America all my life. Actually, I've lived on one section or the other of my grandparents' property most of my life. It's a beautiful place to live, and I have wonderful memories of growing up here. Some of these podcasts will be about life on the mountain, my grandparents, gardening, the local wildlife, and cutting firewood in addition to writing. I've had dogs all my life, too. I'm sure some of them and their antics will slip into the podcast. I may even mention a few cats and horses along the way, but I think most of what I'll talk about are the books and how everything in life relates to the stories.
You get it. You got it before.
In my bio, I call myself an accidental writer. I didn't set out to be a published author. When we got our first desktop computer, and I think that was around 1995, I sat down one Sunday afternoon and started to write a story to make good on something I'd frequently said to my mother and to avoid having to watch football on the television. Now, all you fans out there, don't get excited. Football is fine. The armchair quarterbacking that used to happen in the house, not so much. But I digress. My mother loved Harlequin novels. The ladies where she worked had a really big round-robin book swap happening, and Mom would bring home a grocery bag full of romance novels at a time. She'd read them and then pass the good ones to me. I'd read them and give them back so they could return to circulation. I've been in the local used bookstore and found romance novels with a string of initials I recognize inside the back cover. That was how the ladies kept track of what they'd read. My mother and I had the same initials, so it's pretty cool to come across one of those books. Back in the day, Harlequin was the big go-to for romance, and they were pretty vanilla. Kathleen Woodiwiss hadn't yet come on the scene with the book that changed romance forever. That was The Flame and the Flower. Anyway, I'd say to my mother that I could write a story as good as some of the ones we'd read, and I wrote that first story to prove to her I really could do it. I never doubted I could write. It just never occurred to me to get published. That was not my original intent. My mistake was allowing Mom to read it. She got it in her head that I had to get the book published, and she pushed at me till I gave in. I was finally willing to give it a try because I didn't expect anything to come of it. I went the usual route of submitting to the big New York publishing houses and to various agencies. I got some interesting feedback. I got a few calls for the first 3 chapters, but it didn't feel right to me. I'm not good at jumping through hoops. I showed those letters to my mother, but it didn't deter her at all. She didn't want me to quit trying. I needed more information, so I joined the Romance Writers of America. That wasn't the best experience I've ever had, but it did open my eyes to e-publishing. I purchased a few e-books, but I didn't know much about the business end of it. I sent that first manuscript to a small e-press. I wasn't even sure I wanted it to be accepted, but it was. My mother was happier than I was, which may be a different podcast someday. That book still means a lot to me. It hasn't been available for a while, but someday I may revisit it and apply what I've learned to improve it, if for no other reason than to have it on my personal Kindle reader. That's the short version of how I became an accidental writer. Now we come to today, over 20 years later, and I'm still writing. And now I'm embarking on a new adventure, making a podcast. My entire writing journey has been falling into one space and then falling into the next. I was lucky most of those spaces were good ones. The only thing I deliberately planned was getting into the now defunct e-publisher, Amber Quill Press. Was very deliberate about that. I'd read a good many books they'd published, and I knew they carefully vetted authors. And I was very pleased to get my work into that house and to work with those editors. Working with an editor is a valuable experience. When Amber Quill closed, I decided to publish my backlist as an indie author and concentrate on signing up with another e-publisher for new works. But the more I looked around, the more concerned I became. Did I want to tie up a book for 7 years? No, I didn't. And at that time, contracts seemed to be for that length of time. Did I see the postings on social media of authors not getting paid? Sadly, yes, I did. I ended up being an indie author for everything. But again, having worked with editors proved to be invaluable. I learned something from every edit I went through, and I have that knowledge to apply to my indie published works. There used to be a big stigma against authors who went the independent route, but times have changed, and we can thank Amazon for that. Amazon allowed anyone able to string a few thousand words together into a story to publish it. Whether that's good or bad isn't for me to say. I can't change it, so I work within the parameters it has set. I've changed too since I became an accidental writer. My life has changed. I recently retired from the workforce, and meeting deadlines isn't something I want to do. Last summer, I enjoyed having the largest garden I've ever had, and gardens require a lot of work and attention. That is to say, you must pay attention to what's going on with the plants. I'm also one of those folks who likes to hop on the riding lawnmower and mow the grass. Being outside after decades of being shut up in an office setting is glorious. I love it. But you can't meet writing deadlines from the seat of a tractor. So maybe signing a contract is not a thing I need to do. For all my relative years of experience and relative success, I still struggle with being focused. It's too easy to let the distractions win, especially when the weather is perfect. One of my retirement goals was to make intentional time to write, which will look different than it did 20 years ago. So thanks for listening to my very first podcast. I hope you'll check back and come along for the ride. There are myriad things I can talk about, and I'm going to let the thing we writers call our muse dictate what comes next. There are links in the description below to my website, which is now at kckendricks.blogspot.com for now. That's another story. There are social media links too, or you can simply Google KC Kendricks blog. All sorts of links pop up which will get you to where you want to go. Please like and subscribe so I can increase the visibility of the podcast and grow my channel. One last thing to be aware of, and that's the scammers. I don't have contests, and I don't give away free stuff. If you see something in the comments asking for personal information or telling you I'm going to send you something, it's a scam. I'm not doing those things. It's not me. It's a criminal trying to get to you. Don't fall for it. So thanks again for coming along with me. And I'm always looking to see what is lurking down in the spaces between the keys. Until next time, stay safe.